she said, I've got a tattoo done today. And I said, okay, let's have a look. And she showed me her inner arm, and she had got a tattoo with no. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get that. And that so I did. Takes some, because it's very icky to talk nicely to yourself.
It is, and one of the things I always think is we would never speak to anybody else the way we talk to ourselves.
In 2018, I completely burnt out, both mentally and physically.
Welcome to this week's episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up, my passion project to talk to interesting people about the highs and lows of life and what they've learned. This week we have the absolutely fabulous Susan Walbrook with us. Now, Susan spent over 25 years in fashion and then pivoted to become the CEO of Creative Space Coaching, and is the co-founder of a new initiative called Trust Your Creative. And she's going to talk about how she got to there, what inspired her to start that during our chat today. So Susan, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm honoured, Sam. It's lovely. It's privileged to be here.
Well, I'm very excited for the listeners to hear your story. So I'm going to kick us straight off with, tell us a little bit about that journey into adulthood, your early years.
So my early years, I grew up in, where I am now, which is in Folkestone in the southeast, right by the sea, in a town called Folkestone. And I just went to the local normal comprehensive school and didn't really expect to do that well. However, I had an absolute passion for art. So although I didn't necessarily do well at all maths and English and everything, I knew deep down that art was something that I was really interested in. And it was the 1A that I got in my GCSEs. And I knew from there that I actually wanted to go and do fashion. Because my mum had always been a pattern cutter and a seamstress and worked supplying Marks and Spencer. So she was always the technical side. But I knew I wanted to go and study fashion. So I went and eventually went and done my degree and everything in London, and got my BA honours in fashion design, left, and then basically worked 26 years up through the biggest retailers on the high street, done 12 years as working as a designer, a tailor and designer supplying Next. And then I went on to my last job before, which we will talk about, my burnout, where I finished my fashion career, I was the brand ambassador for Jasper Conran at Debenhams, where I overlooked all of ladies' wear, designed all of ladies' wear, and I also looked over the children's wear and the homeware and checked that it was everything that Jasper wanted. So that's my kind of journey. So my specialism was tailoring and outerwear, which I absolutely loved. So for Next, all those many years ago, Sam, you're a little bit younger than me, but the Next directory was like the biggest.
Yes.
Oh, everyone. How excited was we to receive that Next directory? When it arrived. And I don't know if you remember when they used to have fabric samples in it as well.
I do.
So at that time, I was designing most of their, tailoring and outerwear. And I so thoroughly enjoyed it. I thrived in designing. So my job was coming up with all the colours. I created all the actual fabric. So I worked with mills in Italy, in Turkey, to come up with the actual structure of the fabric and how I wanted it, the patterns, the checks. And then I would design all the colours. And then I would obviously design the look of it. I would spec it all up. I would work with my pattern cutters, and and they were on billboards around, all around the UK, and on buses and front cover of things. So I spent a long time working at Next, and then I left, and then I went to Debenhams, and I went from not only designing tailoring outerwear, which I was an expert in, to then stepping outside my comfort zone, because I was asked to design everything. So that was then
Wow.
the knitwear, the knitwear, the shirts, the blouses, the dresses, everything. So yeah, I designed everything after that, and that was then working with Turkey, China. I flew all around the world, going to factories, specking and doing things like that. So yeah, I've had a pretty amazing creative career. And then I pivoted to something completely different.
So tell us a little bit about what, and you said the word burnout. Tell us a little bit about what happened and
Yeah,
what
yeah,
made you
yeah,
take
yeah.
that big
Yeah, yeah,
pivot.
yeah. So in 2018, I completely burnt out, both mentally and physically. I had just come back from a 3 week working trip in China, and I literally was rocking on a doctor's surgery chair on a Monday morning, not knowing who the hell I was. I just was shaking, I was in tears, and I was explaining to the doctor that I just didn't feel right. And that was because I was totally exhausted from travelling to London, because I lived in Folkestone, on the train to London with an extremely stressful job for so many years, juggling parenthood, single parent period in my life as well, which I'll talk about. And my body, as they say, kept the score, and it literally told me, "You're not going back to work today." I had felt it coming over 5 years, to be honest, and I ignored it. And then finally, it tells you if you don't decide, and it told me. And I had 2 weeks sign off, and that was a Monday morning. But what did I do? I went straight back into work, got on the train, because I was worried that I was already going to be late for work.
So,
And yeah,
so you went to the doctors, they signed you off, and you went to work.
the guilt was, I still didn't accept that my body was telling me to, you got to stop. I still didn't accept it. All I kept doing while I was sitting in that doctor's surgery was thinking, I've got to catch the train. I'm going to be late. They need me. They're going to be wondering where I am. I've got no time for this. And this is, as I say, I was ignoring a very, very big thing that was just about to come around the corner. Well, it had. I was displaying, like, I really didn't know what I was doing I was displaying all of that in the doctor's surgery, but all I kept thinking is, I've got to get on that train. I'm late.
So what happened?
When I went back into work, I discussed with my boss that I'd been signed off. And I was very lucky. She was a female, and she said, I've burnt out twice before in my career. And I was like,
Wow.
okay, so the shame I was fine with. You must take that 2 weeks off work. I was like, okay, but I need to go and just hand over. And she was like, steady. I was like, I've got to hand over. I've got to make sure everything's fine. And I did take the 2 weeks off work after I'd sit down with my assistant and gone through everything. And then, Sam, after that 2 weeks, I'd done something that I'd never done before. I handed in my notice.
Wow.
I
After
had
two
never done
weeks.
that in my life before. And there's even more of a story. My husband done the same thing at the same time. We both handed in our notice.
Wow.
And then life really did change, which I will go into in my other questions. But it was a pretty big decision that we made, and it's the best gift I've given myself.
That's amazing. And you then went and learned to be a coach.
I did, yeah. So I then left, took a year out. Thought it was just going to be 3 months. And I thought, I'll go back and freelance, And I went straight into therapy. Every Thursday, I took therapy. And I thought, again, you just get your 6 sessions. But it actually turned out to be an entire year I was in therapy. And I didn't go back and freelance after 3 months, because what happens in therapy is you start to unlock everything. And where I'd given myself permission to come off the corporate ladder, and it was like a gift, I'd given myself time to think about what I really wanted to do, how I felt, what was going on in my life. I'd previously had therapy, but because I was working full time, I never really got stuck into it. I got stuck into it. And it was through the therapy that I'd realised that the biggest thing that had also caused my burnout was my imposter syndrome, of which I was crippled with for my entire career and my entire life. I recognise I had it as a child. So again, that's something that then moved me to think, I know there are so many other people that are in the position that I was in. I know how creatively imposter syndrome can really affect creatives, because 1+1 doesn't mean 2. I also knew that it was the biggest secret that I kept. I couldn't tell anyone what I had all my life. And I knew that there were so many other people that were experiencing it. I studied it, and I worked with my therapist to overcome it, and tools that you needed to do. And it was a life-changing experience. And I decided, I know what my new venture is going to be now. So I knew I wanted to go and coach other creatives. So I then took a year and took my coaching qualifications through lockdown, actually, and got a distinction, of which I'm going to say now, because I would never have been able to have said that previously, because I would have just not had the guts to say it. I'm very proud that I got a distinction, and I went on and set up the Creative Space Coaching, where I coached for the last 4 years the very best, biggest creative leaders globally on their imposter syndrome, from creative directors that work at the big fashion houses, to students that are just leaving to go into the industry. And I'm really honoured to be in their presence, and them opening up about their imposter syndrome, and me giving them the tools and how to overcome it. So that's how the journey took me to becoming the coach for Creative Space Coaching.
So I think it's such an interesting story, and I think a lot of our listeners, I know, will identify with the kind of the feeling of burnout, the being on the corporate ladder and maybe not feeling like they can get off. Can you explain what imposter syndrome is? Because I think we hear it a lot. But to you, can you explain what it, when you said I've had it all my life, I realised I'd had it. Can you explain what that is, so that the listeners can understand and see if they identify? Because I know you've done lots of work in this space.
Yeah. So actual imposter syndrome is where you truly believe you're not good enough, even though you have all the accolades, the certificates, the qualifications that tell you that you are plenty good enough. However, I then work with people that I call like the inner critic. So the inner critic is the one that tells you you're not good enough, that feeds your imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. So in fact, I tend to also say it's the inner critic, because that's like king, that's feeding it. So my experience of my inner critic and imposter syndrome Well, so I had plenty of examples throughout my fashion career. Firstly, I never, even when I was at art college, I never felt that I belonged because I didn't dress as fashiony as everyone else.
Okay.
So I always thought everyone else was better than me. And then when I did go and get a job, and I was amazing at what I done. I still didn't believe I was good enough. I always had this nagging voice from the moment I woke up, and I had it extreme every day. And it was like this old thing that used to just tell me every time I used to wake up in the morning, everything's going to go wrong today. And this is the day they're all going to find out you really are not good enough. This is the day. And I used to, before I'd even got into the shower, I'd already told myself that the day was going to go really bad. I would then walk to catch the train, and I used to believe that everyone else on the train was way more successful than me. I mean, this is how bad that I had it, and that they were looking at me thinking, oh God, who's she? And it's actually a very good example was when I was at the front row of the fashion show at like Jasper Conran. I used to honestly think that the security would come in and like tell me to go, because they were like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, well, I'm worthy and deserving enough to be here. But I actually felt that people were looking at me, and like all the famous people that were also on the front row, I felt like that. I felt like apologising to them that I was there and I'm not good enough and worthy enough. So that's how I kind of got it. So I'm sure many listeners actually probably resonates with them, is that constant fear that you're not good enough, you don't fit in, I don't belong here, and when will they find out?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. How did you get then? Obviously you said you had therapy. I think obviously learning to coach on this as well probably really helped. But how did you get from there to where you are today?
Wow. So as in my mentally, or my actual job that's got me from...
I mean, I think people will be really interested mentally because, obviously we know each other, but, I really want the listeners to understand how positive you are as a human.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so tell us how you got to being the person who is unashamedly you.
Yeah. So my toolkit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So as I said, I spent so many years with this default mindset of I'm not good enough for so many years that my brain truly believed in it, because everything you tell your brain, it believes. So what you feed it is what it thinks is true. And that's all I was feeding it all the time, was all the negative stuff. It's going to go wrong. They're not going to like it. I'm not good enough. I'm not perfect enough. And then my toolkit that got me out of this was I totally rewired my brain through neuroplasticity. So you can, if you work on it and the tools, rewire your brain to start believing the opposite. So if you imagine you've been telling yourself you're not good enough for so many years, it's become hardwired that you don't actually even think that you're saying it. It's just there. And I learned how to rewire my brain so that I spoke to myself a hell of a lot nicer than I did. And that takes because it's very icky to talk nicely to yourself.
It is. And one of the things I always think is we would never speak to anybody else the way we talk to ourselves.
No.
Like we'd never let someone else say the stuff to us that we say to ourselves, right?
No, absolutely. So one of the things that I do, that I did, and I work with my clients now, is you have to start really loving yourself, Sam. And it really is icky to people. It's an uncomfortable feeling. Like how good are we at taking praise?
Oh, yeah, terrible.
Oh, I mean, it literally like, ooh, isn't it? You know, like, oh no, that was someone else that done that. That wasn't me. And yeah, and it's like, so we have to acknowledge, become aware when you're doing that. That's the biggest thing, is becoming aware of it. Because a lot of people, it's happening and they don't even know that they're doing it. And how long do we spend down? I call it the rabbit hole of rumination. And sit there and go, oh my God, why are they giving me that brief? I can't do it. And I haven't even looked at the brief. I can't do that brief. There's no way I can do it. Are they giving it to me just to trick me? Like, so I would have all these thoughts. And then that was it. Down the hole of rumination, I'm off. And it's like a snowball that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Because then I'd start bringing in all my old beliefs, my old limiting beliefs that I had about myself. I can't do this. I remember when I slipped up with it last time. There's no way that this, that. And then you bring in all your old negative thoughts that you've literally carried with you, unbeknown, for so many years, because it might have been a little comment that maybe one of your lecturers might have said, or your parents might have said to you, and you've carried it, you know, in your subconscious for so long. And then you're down that rabbit hole, and I could spend minutes, hours down that rabbit hole. So the first thing is to become aware of it. When does it arrive and go, oh, there you are, I've caught you. And the trick is to not let it go down the rabbit hole. And you've got to keep feeding it information that you are plenty good enough. So you have to rewire and reframe the conversation that you're having with your inner critic to the point that it goes, oof, she's never spoken to me like this before. And you start to take control of it, and you start telling it, I am plenty good enough. And then you start giving it evidence that you're plenty good enough, because you also work on your me file. And your me file is a file that literally has all the evidence that you are plenty good enough, all your certificates, all the emails where people have gone, you were absolutely amazing doing this, doing that. It's all your evidence that you've got facts that you are plenty good enough. And that's how I done it, Sam. I literally started to throw it the facts that I am, to the point I was doing it several times a day, these conversations, that I started to hardwire my brain to think of positive things. And
it's a mind over matter thing, isn't it? That mind over matter thing. You know, our imagination is so much stronger than what happens in the real world, and I think it takes a real long time to learn that. This feels like a perfect time then to ask you. You said you've kind of had imposter syndrome all your life. What would your 18-year-old self recognise about who you are now?
Wow. Well, I would say she would be absolutely amazed with my entire career in fashion. I mean, she would have been amazed with that, because knowing how much I was crippled with imposter syndrome, you know, the little girl at college with no confidence, to then flying around the world first class. You know, I was being paid to create incredible collections, to being on, you know, billboards and in the next directory. She would be absolutely amazed that I'd gone through that. She would also be incredibly amazed that I set up my coaching practice because of it. And the clients, you know, their caliber of the clients that I'm talking to on their imposter syndrome, she would be really amazed, and that I'd achieved all that. And then, I haven't told you this, following on from me doing my coaching, I then met the most amazing person of who I've co-founded Trust Your Creative with. Like, literally, this is brand new, but I met this amazing person called Oz, who I spoke to about in my imposter syndrome. She spoke to me about hers, and together we went and launched a massive research report. So yes, this is another amazing thing that my 18-year-old would think, oh my gosh. So back in 2023, we decided that we needed to do a huge research report on the creativity, the crisis of imposter syndrome on creativity. And Oz and I interviewed over 65 creative leaders to find out what was going on and how bad was it. We interviewed people from the Obama administration. So my 18-year-old self would be amazed that I even set up that call, because I set up that call, to the vice president of ABC Network, to Emmy Award-winning directors, Hollywood Emmy Award-winning directors, to the CEO of the biggest advertising company. These people opened their hearts up to give us their honest experience of imposter syndrome, the cost that it's had on them, and then what we need to do going forward in order to, it's like a virus that goes through organisations, and we needed to find out what was going on, and we did come up with our key findings. And I know my 18-year-old self would be extremely proud of launching such a report. Really proud, yeah.
So Susan, we touched on the things that you've had to do in life. You mentioned being a single parent. The pivot that you made in the latter part of your career. Tell me about what was the best decision you've ever made?
Absolute best decision, Sam, that I ever made was handing in my notice when I burnt out, because I needed the time to really consider who I was. I'd had a nice salary for a long time that enabled me to live very comfortably, that enabled me to support my daughter when I was single parent, and to hand in my notice was like, you give up your job title. You soon realise that it's actually, you are your job title. And that's not good. That's not good at all. So when you hand in your notice, you're not that job title anymore. So you have to go and seek who you really are. And that's why I went into therapy, to seek who I really was. And that's why I said it's the biggest gift, because you really go and do such deep work that you come out the other side of it having learnt so much. But I could never have done that if I was still continuing to work in the corporate environment the way that I was working it. So handing in my notice was the best decision. And also it was the best decision because I always felt throughout my career, Sam, that I kind of failed as a parent, because and I don't mind talking about this, it's important. I split up from my daughter's dad when she was 4, and I was the breadwinner. And I decided we lived in the Midlands at the time, and I needed to come back home to Folkestone because I was going to become a single parent. So I needed the support of my community around here, my family. But her dad did come back as well. And in order for me to support myself and my daughter, I needed to go to work to London. So I still needed to commute. So she actually went to live 4 days a week with her dad, and I had her for the long weekend. And I really struggled with that. I really struggled with the fact that I was her mum, yet I was also the one that had to go to work. So I felt so guilty for such a long time. However, now I know that obviously she learned lots from me doing that, resilience, courage, and she's, the role model that I was to her. But when I handed in my notice, it was the time when she was just about to take her GCSEs, and it just all fitted in right. You know, I could actually be there for her. I was there for her, and and she needed it, and I needed it, because I needed to know all that guilt that I'd held. Actually, it was okay that I went to work, but this was a really important time for me and her, and to help her get through. So that was my best decision. Honestly, it was the best gift I gave myself.
Life changing.
Life changing. I mean, my life completely changed when I handed in my notice, for the good. If anyone is experiencing this at the minute, maybe, I literally spent all my savings on that year, because I knew that was probably the best thing that I needed to do. It was really scary, and as I said, my husband handed in his notice at the same time. We'd done this together, and it's changed both of our lives. Honestly, I wish I'd done it earlier, but you just don't have the courage to do it.
No. So we're going to touch on advice now. Everyone loves giving a bit of advice. I'm sure you've got lots of advice over the years, and given lots of advice over the years.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given that you ignored?
Wow. I've actually, this is one where I've switched it around. I've actually got the best thing that I did that I would advise not to.
Okay, go for it.
Is that all right?
Yeah, of course it is.
When I was working at one of the big places in my fashion career, I was quite senior, and I took a grievance out, and I was told by so many people not to do it. However, it's the best thing I've ever done, because it actually shifted the whole makeup of that whole organisation by me doing what I'd done. I had a junior designer, and both of us were kind of having a really bad time with a certain person within the organisation, of which I found out many previous designers, like there was a history of it, and they'd actually left because of this one person. And everyone was too scared of this person, because they were very close to the people that hire people, you know, it's a bit of a network. And I decided to take a grievance out against this person to stop all the years of this happening. Something had to change. And I'm so glad that I did, because I know that it would then help all the other designers that came after me. And actually what happened was that quite a few people got a telling off, and they then did actually have to leave. And yeah, it was quite historical, and I'm really proud that I done it. But my boss at the time said, "How dare you do what you've just done?" Like,
so that shows me that even when you had imposter syndrome, you were still willing to stand up for what was right. Even when you internally were feeling that, there was clearly something within you that was like, this isn't right.
Yeah. When something doesn't sit with my values, and when I see something going on, it's a bit like a Me Too moment, you know? It's like, you're like, this is terrible what's going on. This can't go on anymore. And I'm going to have to be the person to break the mold of what's been going on in this place. And I did, because it didn't sit with my values. And the knock-on effect was I got so many people telling me I shouldn't, but then afterwards I got so many people that said, "I'm so glad that you've done that," because I did change a lot of that top structure that was going on. So I'm really proud that I decided to make that decision to do that.
Yeah, no, and absolutely, as you should be. So one of the things that the listeners have told me they're really interested in is getting a little challenge. One of my other interviewees did this recently, so I'm now adding it into the podcast. What challenge would you set to anyone listening to this? What personal challenge would you set to anyone listening to this?
Gosh. Do you know what? And you said I was going to find this question, the answer to this. Looking back at my life and what I've just said now, we all think we should be on one path. Mm-hmm. Well, I studied that, so that's all I know. But I challenge people who are really sitting, listening to this, thinking, I don't really want to be doing this. But I've got to, because I've got, a family, I've got a mortgage and everything. I'd like to challenge you to just consider what you could be doing in 3-5 years' time if you could. Because I truly believe there are many people that think that they can't and give a list of reasons why they can't, and most of them being financial, I can't do it. But actually, if you truly are somewhere where you really don't want to be, the one person that's in control of changing it is yourself. Like, how long do we want to be the victim?
That's a great challenge. Where would you be and where could you be in 3 or 5 years? Just to think about it. So the challenge is just to sit with it, maybe.
Yeah, sit with it, because I bet you could be there. You've just got to work through it, because we tell ourselves we can't do that. That's never going to happen. Actually, reframe it. I am going to do that. How am I going to get there? What do I need to do to change in order to get there? That would be my challenge.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll have to get the listeners to share with us on their socials what they've taken up and when they've taken up your challenge.
And the question is, how long do you want to be a victim of feeling the way that you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know how we've got here, but we've got to the last question.
Yeah.
So, as you know, it's called The Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. So I ask every one of my interviewees to give me the one piece of advice that you would put in the guide.
Yeah.
So what is your piece of advice?
One biggest piece of advice I would give, and hence the title of the new business is Trust Your Creative, is to trust your creative. Now, creative doesn't mean painting, being a designer. We're all creatives. We all make decisions. We all problem solve. We're all creative. And I ask you to trust your creative, because when you trust in who you stand for, when you trust in knowing your true self, when you trust that you can move from being the victim to overcoming self-doubt and living a life full of abundance, no truth means no trust, means no connection, means no collaboration. So when you trust your creative, you trust in collaborating with other people, to connect with other people, to trust who you really are, that you don't need validation from other people. You've got the validation from yourself, and to trust yourself in your wildest dreams, to have the courage to go and find it.
Perfect, thank you. I'm actually going to chuck in a final question.
Go on.
Can you tell me and this is cheeky because I know the answer to this because we know each other, but you haven't touched on it, so I'm going to ask you to. What is the significance of the word no?
Known.
Yeah, no.
No. Okay. Is it my tattoo?
It is. Come on, tell us about it.
Yes. So it was actually one of my clients that works in Paris. She said, I've got a tattoo done today. And I said, okay, let's have a look. And she showed me her inner arm, and she had got a tattoo with no. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get that. So I did. I got one tattoo, Sam, and it's no on the inside of my arm. You won't be able to, you can't see it, that looks at me. So It's a no to me. No, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm not going to do that. Whereas everyone, we all say yes to things, don't we? We need to say no. And I literally got it looking at myself, and I hold it when I need to. And yeah, so I advise everyone to get a no on their arm.
Okay, I think I have to put a disclaimer on there, so we're not suggesting everyone goes and gets a tattoo.
No.
But I think learning how to say no is really important.
Very.
And I think the perfect final piece of advice to put in the guide. So, Susan, thank you so much for today.
Thank
I've
you.
really enjoyed
Thank you,
listening and learning
Sam.
more
I
about
hope
your
this
story.
helps people. I know it's going to resonate with so many people, especially imposter syndrome and burnout and the shame and the guilt and parenthood. And, you know, I just know it's going to resonate with so many people, but it's like, have no shame.
Imposter syndrome comes up in so many of the episodes. That people tell us one of those things they've had to overcome or are still struggling to overcome. So you're absolutely right. So thank you so much. I know the listeners will have really enjoyed hearing your story and your advice and the things that you've learned. I love your confidence of pivoting the question I asked to something you wanted to answer. Brilliant. And I know we'll have taken lots away, and I know Trust Your Creative will be a phenomenal
Well,
success.
that's going to be amazing, because that's when we're really making the difference, because we're going to go out there and change all the organisations, and Oz and I really do have the answers.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If there's someone who inspires you that you'd like me to interview, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok. In the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.